I'd like to introduce everyone to Naphtali Visser, who gives us a fresh take on work stress and how to eliminate it. He is the founder of Humans Working. I suggest you check out his website. And he is the author of Humans Working, the book, which came out fairly recently, I believe. I suggest everyone check those out. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Naf and let him take it away, because he's condensing a 12-hour webinar into 40 minutes. So this is a feat in and of itself.
So thank you all. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about stress, as you know. And the prevailing thought around stress seems to be that a hard life, a busy life, brings more stress, and an easy life brings less stress. And with that understanding or misunderstanding, we've come up with 3 ways to reduce stress. One is stress avoidance, right? We just say, I'm not going to go near the news. I'm not going to have a hard job. I'm not going to go near people I don't like. I'm not going to, do anything that could possibly stress me out. I'm just going to stay away from that all, and that will make me less stressed. The second is stress management. So that can be anything from like holistic things like breathing, meditation, going for a walk, stuff like that. Could be the sort of flip side of that of drugs or alcohol or overeating. But some other things we do to manage stress is we think that we can do the right stuff. If I just do enough of the right things, I won't be stressed, right? If I'm a really good person, right, then I won't be stressed. Or if I can just make enough people like me, then I won't be stressed. Or maybe we think, if I have the right stuff, if I just have enough money, then there won't be any stress, right? Or if I just have enough power, right? Like I could then any stress that comes, I can just overcome it, so to speak, by powering through it. And then there's thinking the right stuff, right? And this is things like NLP, which you may have heard of, neuro-linguistic programming, reframing, which you may have heard, which is sort of the, see the silver lining in something, right? Like just change how you think about something so that it looks better, or anything sort of having to do with modern psychology, right? Talking about, your past, trying to reinvent your programming, rethinking about things that happened to you, thinking about them in a different way, all of that sort of stuff. So these are all sort of stress management techniques in a world of misunderstanding stress. The third one is stress hardiness. And that's just like, you know what? I'm not going to try to hope that the world is different. I'm just going to get tougher, right? And I'm just going to get so tough and bulletproof that nothing can bother me. But today, instead of trying to reframe any of your thinking, we're going to reframe the entire conversation around stress, right? We're going to talk about how stress really works, right? The source of stress. And in doing so, I'm hoping that all of these strategies that I've just described no longer become necessary or even look like a place to look, right? So once you see how the system actually works, the source of stress and the source of well-being, there's nothing to do, right? There's nothing to practice. There's nothing to do, really, right?
So what I'm about to say is going to sound like a preamble, but it's actually a really important part of everything that I'm saying. So today, how to listen. First of all, don't believe anything that I'm about to say, all right? Do not believe it. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. On the same hand, don't not believe anything that I'm trying to say, meaning try to not listen to agree or to disagree, right? Just try to listen to this like a piece of music flowing over you. Don't take notes. There's no 10-step process here. There's no one-step process here. You can really just sit back, enjoy, and try to see something new. That's all that I want to happen today, is that you get one new tiny insight that you say to yourself, never thought about it like that. And through that, hopefully, maybe not by the end of this call, but over the next couple of days, weeks, that, this sort of is, resonates in your skull and say, yeah, maybe it's a little different than what I thought. And through that, maybe, your entire experience of stress can change, right? Now, what I want to say about myself is people ask, well, do you get stressed? And the answer is yeah, but not much, and much, much, much less often than I used to. And when I do, the intensity and the duration is much less, right? So I'm able to sort of see my way out of it much more quickly. So first, let's talk about, I usually call this talk, it's a chapter in my book, Deadlines, Quotas, and Stress. So let's talk about that. So yeah, I get it. Deadlines exist. Actually, some things do need to get done by a certain time. Totally get it. But let's think about the origin of the word. So from what I've come to understand and read, that the word came from the Civil War, the American Civil War. And if they captured somebody from the opposing side, there was not a prison or physical, jail to put them in. So instead, they just drew a line and they said, here, if you cross this line, you die. And it was the dead line. And that seems like something you might get stressed about in a way. But the thing is, we've taken this fear of death, fear of being shot, and applied it to almost everything that we do. Right? We've applied the ultimate price towards, oh, what if my kids don't get to soccer practice on time? To, what if I don't finish this project? To, what if I don't have enough money for retirement? To, a million different things, right? Why is my spouse yelling at me? And most of our stress, what we'd call stress, is not clear and present danger. It's not the fact that somebody might shoot us. It's not that there's a tiger running at us. Most of our stress is worry, right? We're making up stories about what we think might potentially, possibly, sort of, kind of might happen in the future. And then we believe that as if it's clear and present danger, right? So this fight or flight system that we've got built into our bodies is really quite a phenomenal system. But it was designed to be activated once every 24 to 72 hours for a period of about 30 minutes at the max, 30 to 60 minutes at the max. And that kind of makes sense, right? If you can imagine a long time ago, there was like a saber-toothed tiger in your face, and you needed to either run or, beat the crap out of it and kill it. It made sense that would get activated every 24 to 72 hours. I mean, it just sort of makes sense that like that sort of situation might show up every 1 to 3 days, right? And if you couldn't outrun or kill the tiger within 30 to 60 minutes, the gig was up anyway, right? So it kind of makes sense that that's how the system would work. But currently, many people are living in this state of fight or flight 14 to 16 hours a day. There are no tigers, right? There's almost nothing that any of us faces. Most of us have probably faced clear and present danger 5 or fewer times in our entire life. And yet many of us are living in that state most of the time, right? Now, in that state of fight or flight, a lot of really cool things happen, right? Like your blood pressure goes up to send blood to your muscles so that you can run. You get sort of tunnel vision, and in a good way, right? So you can focus on that tiger, right? Hearing the birds chirping in the trees, not going to help you a whole lot in this situation, right? You lose fine motor control because, drawing a pretty little picture with a pencil, not going to help you a whole lot here. You need to be able to club, right? Club and run. That's it. So also problem-solving abilities, any sort of creative problem-solving abilities are drastically reduced, right? Because they don't really matter. The only thing you need to be able to do is run and hit in that moment. The adrenaline increases, of course, right? Make you run faster and so forth. But my question is, at work and in life, but let's just say at work, what skills do you most need when things get stressful in business? Yeah, so people say problem solving, creativity, overview, oversight, humor, analytical thinking, humor again, problem solving, taking a moment to breathe, calm, analytical thinking, negotiation, preparation. Yeah, of course, the ability to think fast on your feet. Yeah. Yeah, so when we have, excuse me, a product failure, or, a customer sends a really nasty email, or, something, we have a data breach, or we've missed a deadline or something like that. Yeah, we need the ability to think, would you say generally, creatively, right? We need the ability to write a nuanced email back to the customer, right? That's the ability that we need. We don't need any of the other things, right? Well, here's the next question. What's the likelihood, it's a rhetorical question, what's the likelihood you can access those skills when your mind is in the mode of swinging a club, right? When you're in this fight or flight mode and you just want to kill, the chances that you can access anything remotely resembling nuance is pretty slim, right? So not only does the state of fight or flight hurt our health and feels horrible and all those things, it also eliminates all of the things that we need to remedy whatever situation that we've perceived as stressful, right? So it's a double whammy. It's completely senseless to be in a stressful state, right? So it often looks like we get stressed about something, but that's not actually how it works, right? It often looks like something happens. Let's say, somebody yells at you, or you miss a deadline or whatever, and then you get stressed, but that's not how it works. We're actually, when we feel stressed, where it's something that has arrived already. We're already in a we're just going to call it a bad state of mind. And then we look for something to blame it on, right? So stress is just a feeling, and a feeling is just a thought. And we don't do our thinking. Thinking is a spiritual energy that just arrives at us, right? If I ask any one of you, what are you going to be thinking in a minute from now? I mean, you may say, I'll be thinking about this talk or something like that, but you have no idea what thoughts are going to pop into your head a minute from now. You just don't. And certainly not half an hour from now or an hour from now. But wherever your thinking is at the moment, you're going to have a corresponding feeling, experience of life. And like I said, what we all do, and myself included, is we feel this feeling of tension, of stress, however stress feels, and then we look around and say, ha ha ha, it must be my wife, or it must be my work, it must be the deadline, it must be my bank account, it must be something else. But it doesn't really work that way. So when I say stress is just a thought, thoughts are harmless. Thoughts are completely harmless until we bring them to life, until we take a thought and turn it into something really big, right? Until we turn it into a story, until we turn it into something that might happen, until we turn it into, a disaster. Here's the example I gave. I say, if you watch the movie like Fast and the Furious, or any stupid action movie, and you watch that movie as if it's a documentary, right? Your life's going to get really tricky, right? If you watch that movie and you say, hey, I had no idea that you could take a sports car, a supercar, and drive it out of a skyscraper and into another skyscraper, and with a perfect landing, and you watch this movie as if it's true, and then you go about living your life as if that's a real thing, of course, your life's going to get pretty difficult. But this is what we do. We take thought and we turn it into, your mind is really good at creating a crazy movie out of any thought that you have. And then we watch that movie as if it's a documentary, and then we act as if it's true, right? So we may have a thought, let's say, you missed a deadline. Now your mind in an instant can create, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. Oh my God, we're going to be homeless, living in a van down by the river. I'm going to become a drug addict. I'm going to have to sell my body just to survive. And all these things, your mind can do that in an instant. And it does. And not only does it do it, you'd think that it would do it and then say, just kidding. But it doesn't. It does it. It creates this picture And then it forces you to watch this picture or this movie as if it's real, as if it's a documentary, right? And then we, of course, when it looks like it's absolutely true that we're going to be living under a bridge somewhere, yeah, of course, that's what feels stressful, but not the missed deadline, not the missed deadline. All right. So it's when I say we're scared of thoughts and they only come to life through consciousness, through the life that we breathe into them. It's kind of like a tea bag, right? If you hate a particular flavor of tea, the tea bag by itself is fairly innocuous, right? Until you mix it with hot water, it's just a bag with some, leaves in it, right? Once you mix it with water, then you get the smell and the taste and all that stuff. But the tea bag is nothing. And that's kind of what thought is. Thought by itself is nothing. But we think of thought as a monster, right? We think that a thought is something that needs to be controlled, but it's not, right? Here's this funny story. One of my clients called me and he was trying to do a career shift. He's a scientist and he called me and he hadn't been working for a couple of years. And he said, I just talked to a recruiter and she said, there's a gap in my resume, so nobody's ever going to hire me. So what do I do? And I said, well, it's kind of what you've just asked me is, I just drew a really scary picture of a dragon on a piece of paper. And now you're asking me, where can I go buy a sword to kill that dragon? Right? I said, what you don't see in the moment and what none of us sees in the moment is that you can just flip the piece of paper over. And I'm not offering this as a technique, but I'm saying when you see that our entire experience of life, good, bad, indifferent, and certainly around stress, our entire experience of life is just coming from the fact that thought is coming to life. And you see that that's all that is ever happening. There's a thought, a corresponding feeling, and then a belief in that feeling or a resonance with that feeling. And that's it. So when you can see that, right, when you can see that, all of a sudden, all of those things that I talked about in the beginning, right, of stress avoidance or techniques to deal with stress, reframing or psychology, or drugs or alcohol or any of those other things, there's nothing to combat, right? It's like you see maybe a person who has schizophrenia or something, who's like swatting at flies that aren't actually there. It's kind of like that, right? The feeling of stress is, of course, absolutely very real. And of course, it's a very real feeling, but there's nothing actually there other than your own thinking that you're swatting at, right? Our natural state, humans' natural state, is a state of well-being, right? Physically and mentally. So while not everybody is living in perfect health right now, our natural state, both body and mind, is one of health, right? When you cut your hand, if you're cooking or whatever, you don't really need to do anything for that hand to heal itself, for that cut to heal itself. You might put a Band-Aid on just to keep the junk out, but instantly over 200 processes start to send plasma and white blood cells and other things to that wound to heal it. Your body is very smart. Whenever you get a cold, even COVID, right? The vast majority of people getting COVID, your body knows how to heal it. The same is true of your mind, right? Same is true of your mind. When we have crappy thinking, there's nothing to do to fix it. Once you see that your mind will reset itself to a state of calm, of presence, of clarity, of creativity, without you doing anything. Now, the analogy I like to give is of a pond, right? Or a pond is by its very nature still. Pond is still. That's its natural state. Now, if you take a giant rock and you throw it in the pond, what happens? Well, you get a lot of ripples and maybe the mud gets stirred up and the water gets murky. But if you want that pond to be still again, what do? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. Precisely nothing, right? I've asked this question in different ways. Sometimes I ask if like you had a bowl of murky water, what would you do? And some people say boil it, but that would just give you a warm bowl of murky water with bubbles in it. It wouldn't settle it. But if you want it to settle, of course, all you need to do is let it be. And that's the same with the mind. The mind, just like the body, just like that cut that knows how to heal itself, the mind is wired for clarity. So one of the questions that I asked in the breakout was, is there a time that you were really stressed and you weren't, and then you weren't, right? And I've had this experience with many clients and prospective clients and friends and my mother and so forth. People will call in a tizzy, freaked out about life, completely freaked out about, and it's usually about something, right? A bank account or somebody who's sick or whatever. And we'll just chat for, a short time, half an hour maybe, usually not about the thing, sort of about what we're talking about now, or maybe just about what'd you do this weekend or something else. And then at the end of the call, people are extremely calm almost every single time. Now, I didn't do this, right? This mind that I'm telling you about that's wired to do this is doing it. But I ask people, if stress came from, if the source of stress was, let's just pick one, your horrible bank account. If that could possibly be a source of stress, and all of these things that you're freaking out about on this call right now, none of those things changed in between, now and 30 minutes ago. None of those things changed, right? Your bank balance didn't improve. You didn't lose weight. You didn't, figure out what, is your purpose in life. Your sick kid didn't get healthy, whatever it is, whatever the people's things are. None of those things fixed themselves. The situation didn't change. And yet your experience of life right now is completely different than it was 30 minutes ago. Why is that? And I'm asking all of you, why is that? If we all believe that these stresses that come at us are causing our stress, then how could it possibly be that in half an hour they don't look that way? Now, I'm not saying that those things are never going to come back. They probably will. But when we can see that that's all that's happening, is that thought is just coming back, and we don't see that it's just thought, right? Somebody said, I don't know who it is that discovered water, but I'm sure it wasn't a fish, right? We live in this world of thought, but we're so in it. We're so in it that we don't see it as thought. We see it as real stuff, right? There's a sort of a story, I don't know if it's true, but it's been told a million times, so I'll tell it as if it's true, that the first movie that people saw in a cinema was like a minute long. And it was basically just of a train coming, kind of just a train moving basically, and people getting off the train. But a lot of people ran out of the theater because they were so scared of this train coming straight at them. They had no idea that they had no idea what a movie was. So they thought it was real. And we, in many cases, have no idea what thought is. So now, as we've all seen hundreds or thousands of movies, we have a really good sense of what a movie is. So we can watch any movie, and while we may still have an experience of being sad or scared or whatever it may be, we still get that it's not real, right? We have a certain movie awareness, if you will. Now, as we get more of a thought awareness, and we see that our thinking isn't real, that a thought of a train coming towards us, or a thought of us drowning, or a thought of us running out of money, or a thought of us anything, it's not real. It's just a movie. It's just a movie, right? We just see that it's just thought coming to life, that whole, creation of a movie thing that I was just talking about. When we see that absent doing anything, just like with the pond, it's going to look like a better movie in a minute, because it has to, because that's how the system is wired. When the sky has really, 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 really dark, horrible clouds that look like, something from a biblical story, what happens 20 minutes later? They're gone, right? the mind has that too. We all have some pretty dark thinking sometimes, myself included. And then we don't, right? And then we don't. So isn't it neat to see the real source of where all of this comes from, right? Isn't it neat to see that we don't need to fix it? Isn't it neat to see that there is nothing to fix, right? One of my coaches says there's no such thing as a solution to a bad feeling. There's nothing to fix. Even when we feel horrible, while it's probably most of us would like to feel better, we can see that there, just like with the pond or the clouds or the world even, there's nothing to fix. There's a certain beauty to life. There's a certain, essence to life. There's a certain, life taking care of life, a flow of life. When there's a stick, and there's a river and there's a stick flowing in the river and the stick gets stuck on a rock, the stick does not think, oh crap, I'm stuck, I need to do something about this. The stick, in quotes, obviously realizes, no, just wait. There's going to be some rain and the water will rise a little bit and then we'll be flowing again. But that whole time, even when the stick was stuck, I like that. It was still in flow. It was still in the flow of life. It may not have seemed that way to the stick, right? The stick may have felt stuck, but that's all part of being in the flow of life. And so many of us think like, oh no, I should be there by now. My neighbor has a Ferrari. I should have one as well, right? Why? How come I haven't achieved something yet? And this is just what our mind does. It just tries to create. It just tries to piss you off. Basically, it's just what minds do. Right? But seeing that, like, no matter how stuck you feel, or behind you feel, or threatened you feel, right? You're always in the flow of life. You have to be. There's no other way around it. There's nobody that is out of the flow of life. Right? So we've got about 10 minutes left. I certainly have more to say, but I would like to open it up to questions. And if nobody has questions, I'll just babble some more. But if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question.
So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the thought that comes first, or the feeling that comes first that then triggers the thought process? Yeah, and the reason is that I think this is that, and by the way, thank you for your talk and everything. This is, I've long held this kind of philosophy and things like that, and I see it all the time, particularly in our kids. They have a thought and immediately it's panic city, right? And it's like, well, wait a second, hold on. Let's unwind this for a second and let's break it down and talk about it and deal with more reality and stuff. But I often wonder that it's the feeling first that comes, it's instantaneous, and then all of the thoughts kind of follow. Or maybe it's a thought, then anyway, I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Well, it's kind of like this neurologist that I know that says, like, there are pathways in the brain, right? So messages travel from like one lobe of the brain to the other, but it doesn't really work that way. It's kind of like cloud to cloud lightning. It kind of all happens at once, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't, to think of it as, it is a process, right? And in some ways, thinking of it as a process is helpful, right? So let me describe the process. So we have sensory input, right? Let's say somebody yells at you, right? Somebody's your spouse or your boss or whatever. Now a sound wave hits your eardrum. We all know how this works, right? And then something has to turn that sound wave into words, right? Before it's, and then the words have to get turned into some sort of meaning, right? And then there's like an interpretation of like, well, I don't deserve to be talked to this way. I work really hard, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's not just the words, it's the energy behind the words too, right? I mean, you can say something one way and say something totally the same thing, but totally differently, and you'll have different impact.
On different people at different times.
Yeah.
Right. So with this, the meaning, the energy, the problem or whatever is never in the message, no matter how it was said, no matter how loud it was, no matter what words were used, no matter what, it's still you. No matter how you feel in any moment is between you and you. So what I wanted to say about a process is all of that happens, right? We get a sensory input. Some sound waves come out of somebody's mouth. It hits our ear, right? And then in an instant, that gets turned into, what the F are you talking about? I don't deserve to be talked to that way. And it happens so fast. That it doesn't look like a process, right? It doesn't look like when you turn on the light switch in your house, the light goes on instantly. But of course, many things happen, right? The energy, the electricity is pulled from the main thing and it goes up the wire to the light bulb and the thing heats up and then but it happens so fast that it doesn't look like a process, right? So in some ways it's helpful of thinking about it as a process to see that it's just your mind doing some stuff. But the way you ask the question, I think it's more helpful to think of it not as like a chicken and egg kind of thing. All right. So I'm going to leave you with that so I can answer a couple more questions. Marilyn, please unmute yourself.
Oh, I think I'm on. Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of this resonates with a lot of other things that I have studied. That's kind of an aside. I guess my question is that all of this, I agree and I understand what you're saying. But what about people, like the body doesn't just heal itself from some things, and as the mind, because some people are wired, like you have anxiety, your brain chemistry is such that you are not at a place. Yes, you can do it, but it's not going to work just that way. Like, in other words, this is I think what you have to say is, it resonates and I think it's right, but there are lots of exceptions, like getting cancer. Your body's not just going to heal itself, it's not. And if you have schizophrenia, you're not going to be able to just use, you know what I mean? So I guess I'm asking for some kind of, I don't know, qualification. What's the word I'm looking for?
Always contact your doctor before starting any exercise program. Well, I do know a psychiatrist who's practicing for over 50 years. And let's say, in the example, he has worked with people, who are, most of my clients are not, like, let's just say psychologically in the realm that you're talking about, right? Most of the folks I work with are neurotypical, call it something like that. But he's worked with people who are certainly not, right? I mean, he has a story of a woman who was, I'll leave out the details, but tortured for a long time and so on and so forth. And she was in and out of, she was a very normal 19-year-old before all this happened. And she was in and out of mental facilities, at least 30 admissions, was on a cocktail of about 50 psych meds. And he happened to be the doctor on the psychiatrist on the floor where she was staying once and during one of her stays. And he said something to her like, you're not upset, you just think you are. And she got very despondent. How the hell would you know? She had, of course, a PTSD diagnosis, severe PTSD diagnosis, and on and on. And he worked with her for a couple of weeks, literally a couple of weeks, about the stuff that I'm sharing today, perhaps much more eloquently than I am. But he worked with her for a couple of weeks, and she saw it, right? She saw that we can't have an experience except in the present moment. We can't have an experience outside of thought. There is no past outside of thought. And in seeing this, literally it melted away. she was back to normal after a couple of weeks. And she went on to just share this with anybody who would listen, right? He also says that schizophrenic people, for example, will have usually several moments of lucidity per day, right? Yeah. Where they, and again, this is obviously not through techniques or trying. They don't really, probably don't even, you could argue that they don't even have that capacity, but they still, but the sort of spiritual nature, the flow of life that I was talking comes through them several times per day. And they say this of Alzheimer's patients also, even, often people that are completely gone, sometimes in their last few days will become lucid again. Yeah. Right. So this is not, again, I'm nothing I'm sharing is pointing to a technique or a thing to do, more towards the nature of life. Right. And
as I said, I totally have, there's a Jewish ethics practice study called Musar, and a key thing is called the pause. And that's really a little bit what you're talking about, is you have the thought and you boom it off into the whole story. And instead you have the thought and you pause.
Yeah. And even if you don't, and you get wrapped up in it, and you can see that that's, like Katya was saying about getting wrapped up in the thing, you can see that that's all that's happening is you're wrapped up in the thing. You can often get out of it. If any of you would like a copy of my book, it's called Humans Working. You can look at it on Amazon, but if you'd like a copy, send me an email and you can say, I want a book. But if you can also just tell me, anything new that you saw, whatever you saw new today, that would be great. If you want to tell me anything that you completely disagree with, that's fine. You want to tell me you think I'm full of crap, but you'd still like to read my book, that's fine as well. And I really welcome, any conversation. And I don't know, I'm going to stay. I know it's 9 o'clock. If people need to drop off, if it's okay with John, I'm going to stay. If other people have questions, I'm really happy to stay and answer them.
Well, Naf, thank you very much for speaking today. I thought this was fantastic.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll bring you back in the future. And you can continue. This is a good topic. It's not a topic that's addressed in these networking groups very often. But in the meantime, because it is 9 a.m. and people have to get on with their day, we will let everybody say goodbye if they want to. And like Naf said, if he's going to stay on for a bit, please stay on if you have any more questions. Thank you.